In just 27 seconds, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors went from sitting calmly on a talk show couch to storming off the set in absolute fury after the host pushed him too far with a series of disrespectful questions that crossed every line imaginable. What started as a conversation about movies turned into a complete meltdown that had the audience gasping, the cameras shaking, and Samuel L. Jackson telling Bill Maher exactly where he could shove his opinions before walking out and leaving the host speechless on live television. Before we get into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Hit that subscribe button now because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Last night on Bill Maher's show, what was supposed to be a promotional appearance for Samuel L. Jackson's latest film turned into one of the most uncomfortable and heated exchanges ever broadcast on late-night television. From the moment Jackson sat down, something felt off. The energy in the studio was tense, and it was about to get a whole lot worse. Bill Maher opened the interview with what seemed like a simple question about Jackson's new action thriller, but there was an edge to his voice that suggested he had other plans for where this conversation was heading. Jackson answered professionally, talking about the intense preparation he'd done for the role and the stunt work involved. He was relaxed, leaning back in his chair, clearly expecting a normal chat about his career and upcoming projects. But Maher had a different agenda. Within minutes, he steered the conversation away from the film and toward politics, specifically asking Jackson about his views on representation in Hollywood. Jackson, who has always been vocal about diversity and equality in the entertainment industry, began to answer thoughtfully. He talked about the progress that's been made but also the work that still needs to be done. He mentioned how important it is for young black actors to see themselves represented on screen in meaningful roles, not just as stereotypes or sidekicks. That's when Maher interrupted him. "But don't you think," Maher said with that smirk he's known for, "that we've moved past all this? I mean, you've had an incredibly successful career. You're one of the highest-grossing actors of all time. Doesn't that prove that the system works?" Jackson paused. You could see his jaw tighten just slightly. "The system works for some people, Bill," he replied carefully. "But that doesn't mean it works for everyone. I got lucky. I worked my ass off, but I also got lucky. A lot of talented people don't get those same opportunities." Maher waved his hand dismissively. "I just think we focus too much on this stuff now. It's like everything has to be about race or gender. Can't we just enjoy movies without making everything political?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Jackson's expression changed. The friendliness that had been there moments ago was gone, replaced by something colder. "Making everything political?" Jackson repeated slowly. "Bill, for people like me, our existence is political to some folks. We don't get the luxury of just ignoring these issues." But Maher wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed to be enjoying the confrontation. He leaned forward, that smile still on his face, and said, "Come on, Sam. You're a millionaire many times over. You live in a mansion. You're not exactly oppressed." The room went silent. Even the audience members who usually laughed at Maher's provocations weren't making a sound. Jackson stared at Maher for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "You think money erases racism? You think because I'm successful I don't experience discrimination? You think my kids don't have to worry about getting pulled over for driving while black?" Maher shrugged. "I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, we're overplaying the victim card here. There are people of all races struggling in this country." "The victim card," Jackson said, and now there was real anger in his voice. "Did you really just say that to me? On your show? On live television?" Maher seemed to realize he might have pushed too far, but instead of backing off, he doubled down. "I'm just being honest, Sam. That's what this show is about. Honest conversation. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable." Jackson laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the studio. "The truth? You want to talk about truth? The truth is, you sit here in your comfortable little bubble, making jokes about things you've never experienced, talking down to people who've lived through things you couldn't imagine, and you call that honest conversation?" The host tried to interject, but Jackson wasn't finished. No. You wanted honest? You're going to get honest. I've been doing this for decades, Bill. I've been in this industry since before you had this show. I've seen the discrimination. I've lived it. I've watched talented people get passed over because of the color of their skin. I've had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. And you're going to sit there and tell me I'm playing the victim card? Maher held up his hands in mock surrender. Okay. I hear you. But you have to admit that things have gotten better. We have diversity initiatives now. Inclusion riders. All of that. Things have gotten better because people fought for it. Jackson shot back. Not because people like you suddenly decided to be nice. And the fight isn't over just because you're tired of hearing about it. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Camera operators were glancing at each other, unsure if they should keep filming. The producers were probably having a panic attack in the control room. But Maher, either oblivious or intentionally provocative, kept pushing. Look, Sam, I respect your opinion, Maher said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But I think you're being a bit sensitive here. This is what we do on this show. We challenge each other. We have tough conversations. Sensitive? Jackson's voice rose slightly. You think I'm being sensitive? Man, you don't know the meaning of the word. I've sat through interviews where people asked me why I was so angry when I was just speaking normally. I've had directors tell me to be less threatening when I was just standing there. I've dealt with this crap my entire career, and now you want to tell me I'm sensitive because I won't let you minimize my experiences. Maher tried to change the subject, clearly realizing he was losing control of the interview. Let's talk about your new movie again. I hear the action sequences are incredible. But Jackson wasn't having it. Nah, we're not done here. You started this conversation, Bill. You wanted to talk about representation and politics. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you think you can speak on issues you know nothing about. Let's talk about how you invite black guests on your show and then tell them their experiences aren't valid. That's not what I'm doing, Maher protested. I'm just offering a different perspective. A different perspective, Jackson repeated, shaking his head. That's what people always say when they want to dismiss someone else's reality. Oh, I'm just offering a different perspective. No, Bill. Some things aren't about perspective. Some things are about facts and lived experiences. And you don't get to tell me that my experiences aren't real just because they make you uncomfortable. Maher's face was getting red now. The smile was completely gone. I think you're putting words in my mouth, Sam. I never said your experiences aren't real. You literally just said I was playing the victim card, Jackson countered immediately. What do you think that means? That's you saying I'm exaggerating or making things up. That's you invalidating everything I just said. The audience was dead silent. Some people looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. A few were nodding in agreement with Jackson. But everyone was completely focused on what was unfolding. Maher tried to regain control. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here and... Don't tell me to take a breath, Jackson interrupted. I'm perfectly calm. I'm just not going to sit here and let you disrespect me and everyone who looks like me. You think because you make edgy jokes and say controversial things that you're some kind of truth teller? You're not. You're just another privileged guy who thinks his opinion matters more than other people's experiences. That's not fair, Maher said, his voice getting defensive now. I've been an advocate for progressive causes my entire career. I've supported civil rights. I've spoken out against racism. Jackson cut him off with a sharp laugh. Supporting causes from your ivory tower isn't the same as understanding them, Bill. You can write checks and make speeches, but that doesn't mean you get it. And the fact that you think it does? That's the problem right there. Maher's face was now fully red. He wasn't used to being challenged like this on his own show. Usually, his guests either agreed with him or engaged in playful debate. This was different. This was real anger, real frustration, and it was all directed at him. I think you're being really unfair here, Maher said, his voice rising. I brought you on this show to have a conversation, not to be attacked. Attacked? Jackson's eyebrows shot up. You think this is an attack? Bill, I'm just talking to you the same way you talk to your guests every single week. I'm challenging your ideas. I'm pushing back on your assumptions. But when it happens to you, suddenly it's an attack? That's interesting. That's not what I meant, Maher stammered. Then what did you mean? Jackson demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're fine with confrontation, as long as you're the one doing the confronting. But the second someone pushes back on you, you can't handle it. The host tried to redirect again. Look, we clearly have different views on this, and that's okay. That's what makes for good television. But maybe we should... Good television? Jackson interrupted again, his voice dripping with disbelief. You think this is about good television? This is about respect, Bill. This is about you bringing me on your show, asking me loaded questions, and then acting surprised when I don't play along with your narrative. Maher was visibly frustrated now. My narrative? What narrative? I'm just trying to have a conversation. Your narrative is that racism isn't that bad anymore. That successful black people shouldn't complain. That we should all just shut up and be grateful for what we have, Jackson said, his voice steady but intense. That's been the underlying message of everything you've said tonight. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not the one. The audience let out a collective gasp at that last statement. Jackson's tone had shifted from frustrated to absolutely done with the conversation. Maher seemed to sense it too, because his demeanor changed slightly. He tried to soften his approach. Sam, come on. Let's not let this get out of hand. We're both adults here. We can disagree without what? Jackson challenged. Without me getting upset? Without me calling out your bullshit? That's what you want, isn't it? You want me to smile and nod and let you say whatever you want without consequences. Well, that's not happening. Maher's patience was clearly wearing thin. You know what, Sam? I think you came on this show looking for a fight. I think you wanted to make this about something it didn't need to be about. That was the wrong thing to say. Jackson's eyes narrowed dangerously. I came on this show to promote my movie and have a conversation. You're the one who turned it into this. You're the one who brought up the victim card. You're the one who dismissed everything I said. Don't you dare try to flip this around on me. I'm not flipping anything around, Maher insisted. I'm just saying that you seem awfully defensive for someone who claims to be so confident in their position. Defensive? Jackson's voice was incredulous. Man, you really don't get it, do you? This isn't about being defensive. This is about standing up for myself and for everyone who doesn't have a platform to call out this kind of crap when they hear it. The two men stared at each other across the desk. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The audience didn't know where to look. Some were pulling out their phones, probably texting friends about what they were witnessing. Others just sat there with their mouths open, unable to believe this was really happening. Maher tried one more time to salvage the interview. Look, I respect your passion, Sam, I really do. But I think we're talking past each other here. Maybe we should just agree to disagree and move on. Jackson shook his head slowly. No, I don't think so. Because agree to disagree is what people say when they want to end a conversation without actually addressing the problem. And the problem here is that you think your comfort is more important than the truth. You think maintaining this friendly, jokey atmosphere on your show is more important than having real, difficult conversations about race and privilege. That's not true, Maher protested. I have difficult conversations all the time, with people who look like you, Jackson pointed out. When you talk to your white guests about politics, it's all intellectual debate and witty banter. But when you talk to black guests about race, suddenly we're being too sensitive or playing the victim card or making everything about identity. You see the difference there? Maher opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For once, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Jackson watched him struggle for a moment, then shook his head again. You know what, Bill? I'm done here. I came on your show in good faith, ready to have a real conversation. But you've made it clear that you're not interested in listening. You're only interested in hearing yourself talk and proving how edgy and controversial you can be. Well, congratulations. You've been controversial. You've pushed your guests to the breaking point. I hope it was worth it. Jackson started to stand up, and you could see panic flash across Maher's face. The host realized he was losing control of the situation completely, and there was nothing he could do about it. Sam, wait. Don't leave. We can work this out. But Jackson was already standing, removing his microphone. No, Bill. We can't work this out. Because working it out would require you to actually listen and reflect on what I've been saying, and I don't think you're capable of that right now. You're too busy defending yourself and your precious show to actually hear what I'm telling you. This is ridiculous, Maher said, his voice getting heated again. You're walking out because I challenged your views? That's incredibly immature. Jackson stopped removing his microphone and looked directly at Maher. The look on his face was pure steel. "No, I'm walking out because you disrespected me." There's a difference between challenging someone's views and dismissing their entire lived experience. You did the latter. And I don't have to sit here and take that from you or anyone else. "I didn't disrespect you," Maher insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Yes, you did," Jackson said firmly. "You disrespected me when you suggested I was playing the victim card. You disrespected me when you implied that my success means racism isn't real anymore. You disrespected me when you tried to tell me how I should feel about my own experiences. And then you disrespected me again by acting like I'm the problem for calling you out on all of it." The audience was completely silent. Some people were nodding in agreement with Jackson. Others looked uncomfortable, probably because they were starting to realize that Maher had, in fact, crossed some serious lines during this interview. Maher tried to salvage his dignity. "Fine. If you want to leave, leave. But I think you're overreacting to what was just supposed to be a spirited debate." That was the final straw. Jackson's voice, which had been controlled and measured even in his anger, now rose with real fury. "A spirited debate? Is that what you call it, when you bring someone on your show and then spend the entire time belittling them? When you dismiss their concerns and mock their experiences? That's not a debate, Bill. That's you using your platform to punch down at someone who came here thinking you were going to have a respectful conversation." "I never punched down at you," Maher said, but he sounded defensive now, like he knew he was losing whatever argument he thought he was making. "Every single thing you said tonight was punching down," Jackson countered. "Every dismissive comment, every time you rolled your eyes, every time you suggested that racism isn't a big deal anymore because I'm successful, that was all punching down. And the fact that you can't even see that proves my entire point about privilege and perspective." Maher's face was now a deep shade of red. "You know what, Sam? Maybe you should leave, because clearly you can't handle an honest conversation without getting your feelings hurt." The audience gasped audibly at that. Even some of Maher's regular fans looked shocked at how he was handling this situation. Jackson just smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been proven completely right about everything they'd been saying. "There it is," Jackson said quietly. "There's the real Bill Maher. Not the progressive champion you pretend to be on TV. The guy who, when challenged by a black man, immediately tries to make it about hurt feelings and sensitivity. Thanks for showing everyone who you really are, Bill. It's been educational." Jackson finished removing his microphone and set it down on the chair. He looked out at the audience, many of whom were now applauding him, and gave them a small nod. Then he looked back at Maher one last time. "You can edit this however you want when you air it," Jackson said. "You can try to make me look like the bad guy. You can tell your viewers that I was being difficult or unreasonable. But everyone in this room knows what really happened here tonight. You invited me on your show and then disrespected me repeatedly. And when I called you out on it, you couldn't handle it. That's the truth. And no amount of editing is going to change it." Maher sat there behind his desk, speechless. For a man who makes his living talking, he suddenly had nothing to say. Jackson turned and started walking toward the exit. The audience's applause grew louder. Some people were standing up now, giving him a standing ovation as he left. "Sam, come on," Maher called after him weakly. But Jackson didn't turn around. He just kept walking, his head held high, his dignity intact. As Jackson reached the edge of the stage, one of the producers tried to approach him, probably to ask him to stay or to smooth things over. But Jackson just shook his head and kept moving. He disappeared into the wings of the studio, leaving Maher sitting alone at his desk with a stunned audience and a show that had just gone completely off the rails. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing Maher's shocked expression and the audience's continued applause for Jackson's exit. Then someone finally had the sense to cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In the span of less than 15 minutes, what was supposed to be a simple promotional interview had turned into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. Backstage, crew members watched Jackson leave the building without saying a word to anyone. His publicist rushed after him, phone already in hand, probably preparing for the media storm that was about to hit. But Jackson just got into his car and drove away, leaving behind a studio full of shocked people and a host who had just learned a very hard lesson about respect privilege, and what happens when you push the wrong person too far. The audience slowly filed out of the studio, buzzing with energy and disbelief about what they'd just witnessed. Some were already on their phones, posting about the confrontation on social media. Others were having heated discussions about who was in the right and who was in the wrong, though the majority seemed to side with Jackson. Back on the now empty set, Maher sat at his desk, the reality of what had just happened slowly sinking in. His producers gathered around him, trying to figure out how to handle the situation, how to spin it, whether to air the footage or not. But they all knew the truth. This wasn't something that could be easily fixed or explained away. This was a genuine moment of reckoning, broadcast live for everyone to see. Samuel L. Jackson had walked onto that stage expecting a professional interview about his work. Instead, he'd been confronted with dismissive comments, disrespectful implications, and a host who thought he could say whatever he wanted without consequences. And Jackson had done something that few guests have the courage or the platform to do. He'd stood up for himself, called out the behavior, and walked away with his dignity intact, leaving Bill Maher to face the consequences of his own words and actions.